Who among you have tried building puzzle pieces? So, ulit. Okay. Who among you tried following recipes? Cooking. 3 for 3. Good ako doon. All those questions kasi, those were my options in terms of trying to represent the module writing or module development process. No? It's just like building Legos. Normally, you have, at least for Legos na meron kayong kailangang buuin na model, you have to follow certain instructions, right? To come up with this certain model correctly. But at the same time, there are Legos na free-flowing, right? You can tweak, design, make those patterns your own, models your own. In the same manner, sa puzzle pieces, though, you have to follow rin or make sure that certain pieces come together, go together. Yon, you have to stick to the pattern, to the picture that you have to create. Now, the third metaphor, you have to cook something by following a recipe, at least in the first time that you'll do it, right? So that at the very least, you're sure that you're doing it well, you'll get the taste correctly, and so on and so forth. But if you're used to it na, diba, you can experiment. Instead of putting vinegar, for example, you put calamansi or lemon kung social. Pero iba yung taste nun. For adobo, halimbawa. And so on and so forth. So module writing or module development is just like any of those three, somehow, partly, partially, which you can do individually or as part of a team. Now, ideally, this topic, module development and module writing, is done, at the very least, the rapid version, for an entire day, not to come up with a module draft. But this time, the challenge for you as peer tutors will be to come up with a module draft, at least for one topic within one module, or one lesson within the course, for half a day, or 4 hours, or 3 pa nga. But, that is precisely the reason na group kayo. So what will be my role? No? Considering those expectations. Definitely, I hope to facilitate your writing of the module study guides with your peers. The goal for this session and beyond is for you to be able to help your peers learn. But beyond that, we want to keep them engaged and be more responsible for their own learning. The next thing that can guide how you'll design your study guides would be referring to the classical traditional learning theories. And by classical, we have the big three. Plus, may one more because in the digital age. So nag-arise lang, pero hindi siya contemporary na yun. The first is behaviorism. I don't need you to memorize the terms. I need you to at least have a fundamental grasp of the points, no, that they embrace. For behaviorists, ang key to ensure that learning has occurred ay if you observe a change in the behavior. So if your peers, kung makita nyo from yung first session nyo, parang napipilitan lang or hindi masyadong motivated and then eventually mababago yan, or mas interested na siya, or mas mabilis na niya mag-grasp yung whatever it is that you teach him or her, there is learning there. Sabi ng behaviorist. If you will base your design sa behaviorism na beliefs, there can be a system of reward and punishment. Mga early studies there, Skinner's box. Now, there's this hungry rat. The rat presses a lever, yung food pellet, marireceive niya. Kasi eventually, na-realize niya na yun yung result. So every time, press na siya ng lever. So paano yun translated dun sa peers nyo? I'm not saying they can be your lab rats. What I'm saying is you may need to build routines as cues for them so that they'll be able to form habits rin. And eventually, baka there be a change in behavior. But hindi yun applicable sa lahat ng disiplina, sa lahat ng kurso, sa lahat ng topic. I think mas yung system of reward. Simply praising them, making sure that they're relaxed, no? Those things, whether through your in-person discussion or dun sa study guide, yung mga phrases or statements na, well done, ganyan, good job. Hindi lang yan pambata. Okay? Those simple things, you can incorporate those in your study guides. Yung sa stimulus response ng behaviorism, si Pavlov, meron siyang conditioning na experiment wherein there's this hungry, hindi na rat, dog naman. Supposedly, there's a schedule ng feeding time for that dog. Eventually, nagsisalivate yung dog. So, inaabangan na niya. Natatakam na siya. Hanggang sa gayon lang, no? Yun lang yung stimulus and then yung response. And then, eventually, nag-introduce siya ng bell, si Pavlov. Along with the food. Hanggang sa kahit wala na yung food, so ganun pa rin yung response, no? Nagsasalivate pa rin yung dog. Hanggang sa wala na yung food, pero bell na lang upon ringing, ganun pa rin, interestingly, ganun pa rin yung response ng dog. I'm not saying na i-audition nyo yung mga peers nyo na ganun, no? Na meron kayong reward na every time you have a chocolate or something as a reward for good behavior. Pero that's how conditioning works. Now, in your study guide and in your in-person discussion, you need to find a counterpart. That can be a strategy. So that's for behaviorism. Next po, cognitivism naman, ang main point here, learning is an information processing exercise. Ang pwedeng example dyan is whenever you hear a song, for example, kung hindi kayo nakaka-relate doon, hanggang doon lang siya, di ba? Input, you hear it. Kailangan nyo makarating dun sa second one, the processing part. Kailan nangyayari na pwedeng may processing dun sa ganun na input received? Either you can relate to the lyrics, hugot, the term, hugot. So hugot kayo dun, or the melody reminds you of someone, something. So, napaprocess nyo siya until such time na makommit siya sa long-term memory. Pero hindi pa dun yung learning. Hopefully, nandun na siya sa long-term memory mo, di ba? For the cognitivists, yung learning, it occurs if you're able to retrieve yung mga nandun sa long-term memory mo and you can create an output out of those. So, ano yung implication nun in your module study guides? Definitely, you have to ensure structure, order, and in a way, chunking. Kasi kailangan ready yung learners, yung peers, to receive whatever it is, whatever input you'll give them. Para ma-process nila, makommit nila sa long-term memory. Pwedeng tandem yan ni behaviorism na you form a habit, a pattern, ulit-ulit, drills, exercise. Hanggang sa, hindi na nila makakalimutan. Okay, next, constructivism. This one, ito yung medyo mas, I guess familiar na kayo. In that, constructivists believe na learners occur if you co-construct it with your peers or knowledgeable others. Hindi start from scratch, hindi passive yung learners. And sometimes, ano implication in your study guide? Sometimes, you don't need to provide the inputs agad. Mag-lecture kayo to supplement the lecture of the faculty, of the instructor. Hindi ganon lagi. Sometimes, you just provide them a problem, a case, challenge them with something, and relate it pa lang doon sa topic that you have to discuss in your study guide. No, meaning, the processing will come from them. What you need to do is provide prompts para mag-isip sila. Next po. Okay, si connectivism, recent yan, only because the traditional learning theories did not account for the digital technologies. And for for connectivists, we have the source of knowledge and information and potential learning ay hindi lang sa isang tao galing or sa group of people. There may be people involved, sure, but also other networks and the other resources that you may find online. Kailan nag-occur yung learning? You have to ensure that your peers will be able to process, will be able to evaluate those resources, those networks that they find online, and make sure that they can gauge alin yung beneficial for them. So, ganun lang naman yung point nung connectivism. Kailan yan? Bakit yan important? Bakit ko siya in-insert? Because your study guides, as I mentioned, they will be your extension, di ba? And content, hindi lang naman galing kay faculty, kay instructor. Hindi rin dapat galing lang sa inyo or sa inyo and kay faculty. There are numerous sources of content, di ba? That you find ever. Yun nga yung edge nyo yan, dali lang. Back in our days. Pupunta pa kami library talaga to get the key or seminal work information that we need to find. Either that or through the grapevine, like Marites. No? But so here, the challenge for you is to curate well the content and ensure that you guide your peers in terms of how to absorb, how to use yung content. Second way that can guide you is in terms of understanding that there are 6 learning types. At least according to Lori Lard. The learning types is based on Lori Lard's conversational framework, and it's really just a distillation of the classical learning theories. But here, for her, there are only actually 6 types of learning. And the best way to design your courses, in your case, your module study guides, is to ensure rich combination of all these 6 types. No? But at the center, of course, ay yung learner pa rin. Their concepts and their practices, and what they do. I can explain each, but it will be better for Lori Lard herself to explain.
Of course, thinking about what should be the sequence is quite difficult because there is no determinable way of saying, I want the students to learn this, and I know they're here at the moment, so therefore what should that pathway be? There are many, many pathways it could be. And the point of using the conversational framework, and I developed that some time ago on the basis of all the information that we had at that stage about what it takes to learn. So there are a number of research projects characterizing how students learn and what characterizes the way they learn. So the conversational framework was a way of trying to distill all of that into enabling the teacher to think about what is the student having to do in order to understand something. And I ended up choosing just 6 different types of learning. Learning through acquisition, that's reading or watching or listening. Learning through practice, learning through discussion, learning through inquiry, learning through collaboration, and learning through production. And all of those are things that we've always got students to do. Learning through collaboration, you get students working together on something, they learn from each other. Learning through production, we always ask students to produce some sort of evidence of how they've learned, an essay or a project or a design or even a performance. And learning through inquiry, we send them to the library, and now we send them to the web and so on. So the other part of the learning designer is it makes you think about how to use technology. Because very often people get stuck with a particular kind of technology and they want to use, I don't know, podcasts or something. But it's very important to understand that all a podcast does is just provide a student with yet another way of listening. They're not doing very much. So it's very important to have a framework from which you can ask the question, what kind of activity is this technology enabling the students to do? So the conversational framework is really a diagram that you can work through and say, well, to what extent am I getting the students to do this and to do this and to do this? And we try to mix it up. It's better if we have a number of different ways of thinking about and doing things with the ideas that we're getting from the teacher. That's the point of it.
But basically, kasi the danger really, sometimes we just provide content expecting the students to acquire knowledge, right? I'm not saying all. Faculty rin, they tend to just provide, okay, go, I'm not sure kung ginagawa niyo ba to. You go to this and access, in this case baka yung LMS na, access this PowerPoint presentation or a journal article, and then they'll just expect you to read. That's a no-no. Okay? Unless higher level na, yung year level no. Meaning there's a certain trust from the faculty na that you can study on your own, no, that resource. For your peers in your development of the study guides, you have to ensure that you will guide them how they will study a specific resource. Lalo na, if in case you're not going to be there to tell them what to highlight, what to take note of, what to listen to, for example, what sections to watch. Okay. The third guide in terms of what research says as to how people learn would be to adopt Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, as a framework. Here, UDL by CAST as a framework was established based on their research findings as to how brains work. There and other researchers before them. No? Let's do the what of learning first. The what of learning in terms of designing your courses and designing your study guides, it's simply providing multiple means of representation. Meaning, if you, in your study guides, ideally, if you provide a written text, there should be, in the ideal scenario, there should be an audio version, video version, so multiple formats, multiple ways that they can be studied by the learners, your peers. No? That's the ideal. To ensure that the resource that they will access will suit yung certain level nila. I'm not gonna say learning styles kasi hindi naman na yun true. Pwede learning preference, no? Na where they can better assimilate and accumulate information and knowledge and process. The how of learning, multiple means of action and expression. Basically, through your study guides, you can ask them to answer something or prepare an output in different ways. So it's not just answering a quiz. Unless for self-check, mababaw lang. No? Comprehension check lang siya. You can ask them to produce something. Diba? Yung in relation to Lorillard's, no? Learning types. So huwag kayong malimitahan. Kung ganito yung sa design ni faculty, that's fine kasi definitely there is a purpose for that. But what else can you do, no, to supplement, to enrich? Kasi your peers, if ever, your tutees, there's a reason why they needed additional help, diba? So you find alternative ways na hindi pa na-provide ni faculty. Now, the why of learning, you have to ensure that there are multiple means of engagement. I mentioned kanina that you have an edge. No? You should ideally know what will interest your peers more. That's why an implication on sa study guide development. Even if you have that study guide, at some point you may need to tweak a few things based on what you will learn from your tutees sa first session, halimbawa. No? Pero at least, konti na lang yung kailangan yung baguhin because you have that structure na, your skeleton or foundation. For further guidelines, yung C, you can scan kasi madami siya. At isang workshop ang UDL. And as I mentioned, you have to have the basic study guide first before you can think about designing with UDL in mind. No? Alright, next po. First reflection prompt. Shall you incorporate everything that these research say sa study guide nyo? The answer actually can be both yes and no. Do you need, depending on the topic, of course, and the kind of duties that you will have, do you think you will need to learn from the classic theories, traditional theories? You think you will need to consider the learning types to ensure that they have a healthy mix, hindi lang puro acquire, hindi lang puro produce, hindi lang puro inquiry, and so on and so forth. Kailangan ba lahat yan? And kailangan ba all the conditions, because there are a lot for UDL guidelines, do you have to meet them all? Eh di sana kayo na lang yung faculty. Joke lang. There's really no definite answer. No? Kasi it will depend on your duties, the nature of the topic, and the needs of the duties that you'll have. But, kung yes man ang sagot, you'll try to incorporate them all, wala naman din masama, right? If it means they will learn better. Punta tayo ngayon dun sa classic distance learning guidelines naman. Why are these important? It's important that you're familiar, at least oriented sa basic points of the classic distance learning theories because there may be guidelines and principles that you will have to adopt because you'll provide these study guides virtually or kahit traditional distance teaching and learning. Wherein you'll just think of the handouts that your faculty provide you. Nakalimutan ko itanong kanina, sino pala dito? Kasi I heard kanina na most, if not all of you, ay batch 2022 and younger. Dun sa mga 2022, being the oldest, sino yung nakaabot pa ng mga version ng study guides or modules from their faculty? Okay, nice. At least meron pa. Kasi ibig sabihin, yung faculty, hindi niya iniwan yung ginawa niya. Good job sila doon. Alright, may edge yung mga nakaabot pa because at least you know the pattern, no, and the structure, the look of what module study guides can be. Because all of these things, back in 2020 to early 2022, lahat yan sinabi namin sa kanila. Rin naman. So really, para na talaga nga kayong faculty. I'm not sure if it is too much to expect from you or baka sakto lang. Feeling ko naman sakto lang. Kasi as a group naman kayo gagawa ngayon. Ngayon, as a group. Beyond this, I'm not sure anymore. But anyway, so we will discuss 3 classic distance learning theories. Next po. So theory of equivalency, basically, ang point lang naman yan is, whatever it is that you do in person, you don't necessarily have to have a counterpart sa online or sa distance, kung hindi man online. No? But at the very least, the experience would be equivalent. So think of, bakit yun yung illustration? Think of a square and a triangle. They're different, fundamentally, different shapes, right? But they may have the same area. Oh, kunwari, alam ko yun. Bilang com-arts naman ako, tsaka language. So, ganun lang din yon. In person, iba yung experience, right? There's immediate feedback. I can see that there's transactional distance, meaning psychological, physical gap, even if magkakasama tayo dito. Some of you are really sleepy right now. Some of you are thinking of, I'm not sure, tonight ba? Some of you are taking notes. Good job. Oh. So all the more pa yung sa distance, di ba? Sa distance learning. You're not sure if they will do whatever it is that you intended for them to do before your in-person session or even your online synchronous session. ideally, ganun, di ba? Well, at the height of the pandemic, honestly, did you try to do whatever it is that your... Hindi ko pa tapos yung tanong, nag-no na siya. Did you try to do whatever it is that your faculty, your teachers tried or at least expected you to do or read or watch or before the synchronous session? Hindi, di ba? So, nagtyaga kayo, synchronous session nyo, 8 to 5. Ganon. Proud pa. Kaya tuloy, edi umay na kayo sa online. But anyway, so ganun pa rin. The lessons back then, you need to think of it now as you design your study guides. As I mentioned, pangatlong beses ko na itong ulitin, your study guides will be your extension. You may reiterate points kung ano yung sasabihin nyo, in-person session nyo or synchronous, meaning same time na video conference nyo with your tutees, for example, in case hindi kaya yung face-to-face. Pwede nyo ulitin, pero pwede rin may iba. Kasi whatever it is that you cannot explain because you don't have the time, for example, in person, dun nyo siya gagamitin. Dun nyo i-translate sa study guide. So that's really the point of theory of equivalency. Next po. Sa interaction equivalency theorem naman, you don't need to remember the terms, ha? Ang point lang naman nito ay dalawa. There is the first point is that there are three kinds, at the basic level, three kinds of interaction that you have to foster as the designer for learning. The usual learner-teacher interaction, you being the teacher, you have to design your study guide such that there will be an opportunity for your peers, your tutees, to interact with you. Madali yun in person. I mean, it's just a one-on-one discussion. How about for yung sa distance part? Your instructions, your guidelines, your feedback, done asynchronously, meaning not real time, can be your voice, can be your interaction. That is why, dun sa susunod na theory, merong two types of conversations. That's the first point, no? There are three interactions. The second kind of interaction, learner-learner. Madali rin yun. Right now, for this session at least, I am expecting that you try to maximize the learner-learner interactions. Paano naman yun pag sa study guides? Usually, synchronous na at saka sa in-person session yun na yun. Aside, kasi kayo rin yung peer, kayo rin yung student nakasama nung tutee. Now, the third type, maybe ito yung baka new, relatively new for others, there is learner-content interaction. And this is where the study guide really has to be designed well. How would you ensure, how would you facilitate that interaction between your tutee and your wife? Between your tutee and the content. So for example, kanina si Lori Lard yung video niya. It's just a short video. If I were to make a study guide, prepare a study guide for you, expecting that you will, at the very least, browse, view, kahit first 30 seconds ng video, paano ko i-design yung study guide? That's the challenge. How will you enable or instruct them and motivate them to interact with the content? In various ways, kahit hindi lang yan instructions actually, even through your activities. Later, when we discuss yung actual design na, we will cover yung scaffolding mechanism, meaning how you try to encourage them to interact with content. So that's the first idea, no? That there are at the very least three basic types of interaction. The next idea nitong theory nito is that okay na kahit isa lang yung rich na interaction. Really, there will be learning. Kahit learner content lang yan. Or learner. Kayo lang, one-on-one. But, preferred na mas madaming types of interaction yung ma-design. because that's higher learning quality raw. Unfortunately, meron yung equivalent counterpart na cost and time. No? But in your case, because you're not expected naman to write a full-blown module or study guide, no, for your peers, kaya naman yan. So, kaya yan ma-maximize. Next po na slide. For yung sa, I mentioned a while ago, there are two types of conversations. One is real and another is simulated. Yung real, you know this already, meaning how you converse, how you interact with your tutees. Whether in written, whether in person or online na synchronous session. Yung simulated conversation, yun yung sinasabi ko kanina na through your instructions, through your guidelines, through your prompts, it's as if you're speaking to your peers, to your tutees. But the idea here is you have to foster the feelings of personal relations, the sense of belongingness, no? The camaraderie. Lalo na, if the course itself is intimidating, the faculty, the professor is intimidating, so doon kayo talaga papasok. You're gonna be an ally for your tutees. Although, the image that I used, medyo galit si ate, no? I wanted to just point out na in your module study guides, you have to be careful with your tone. Earlier, so dun papasok yung this morning's session. No, you have to ensure that you're not violating anything when you, lalo na kasi written siya, or pwede nyo naman yung lagyan ng audio, like may video recording kayo dyan. Vlogger lang yung peg. But then again, much of your study guides will be written. And baka iba yung tone, if ever. No? So you have to be just careful in how you phrase your study guides. Next. Okay, next, distance learning theory, or guideline is really cognitive community of inquiry framework that highlights three presences in relation to the three types of interactions that I mentioned. Cognitive presence, meaning how you challenge your peers. So you can trigger them with a problem or a case, for example, and then eventually, doon na mag-umpisa yung what it is that they have to do. Essentially, ensuring that there's something happening sa kanila and sa content. No? That's cognitive presence. Teaching presence, you know this already, it's really you as the teacher, whether in real conversation or simulated conversations. Social presence, ito yung sense of belongingness, mas relaxed na relationship between you and your tutees. Without, of course, going beyond yung acceptable na relations. Next. Okay, now, should you incorporate all of those? Ideally, yes. Kasi the point of study guides ay, again, fourth time na sasabihin ko, an extension of you, of how you teach your peers, your tutees. So therefore, it will be ideal that you adopt the guidelines, the frameworks, the approaches to distance teaching and learning. Next po. Okay, now, I want to know how you feel aside from being sleepy. Knowing all those theories, guidelines, and frameworks, okay lang kahit di nyo nasagutan. Pero you have to say it orally. That's why most of the faculty even, they feel it's a tedious process because they have to anticipate how the learners will feel challenged in a good way and in a not so good way. They have to be challenged. Kasi they have to be triggered, diba? To think about what it is that they're studying, they're watching, they're listening, they're reading. But at the same time, if it's gonna be too much of a challenge, edi lost din yung attempt natin to try to teach them something or clarify a misconception even. Tapos, so madodoble yung effort natin sa in-person session. Bakit nag-study guide ka pa? Di ba? Wala, gusto mo lang. Or required. Okay, next po. Now, all those medyo theoretical pa yan. So, punta na tayo sa practical. Okay, how can you translate theory to practice in light of your tutor task? The general answer is you develop your module study guides well. Diba? Guided by all these frameworks and guidelines and best practices supposed to be. The idea is it's going to complement whatever it is that your faculty, the faculty pala, pwede namang hindi nyo sila guro, has prepared for that specific module or that specific topic of the course. Complement siya. And complement rin and supplement your in-person sessions or synchronous sessions with your peers. But, let's clarify lang, no? Para shared understanding, what is a module study guide? If I say study guide, if I say module guide, learning guide, they all mean the same thing, in this context. For a module study guide, it's really keywords organized, integrated, set of learning resources, teaching and learning activities, including assessment tasks if needed. By assessment tasks, formative man yan, typically formative, or summative. But I'm not sure if you'll be required to always prepare summative assessments kasi level yun ng midterm exam or end of the course project. No? So at the very least, formative assessments kasi that's a point of peer tutoring, di ba? You need to enrich yung experience of your tutees so that they'll gain more confidence aside from understanding dun sa topic that they may find difficult. Really, the aim is to provide learning scaffolds for learners. By scaffolds, parang kapag sa construction, you provide the scaffolds, the framework, the skeleton, the base, the foundation. Kasi ang aim mo is for them to develop a deep understanding. So that's a module study guide. Typically in written form, math. Interactive PDF, man yan. H5Ps, na mas text, no? What else? Web pages, and so on and so forth. But because there are different various digital technologies na, so in multimedia formats dapat. Sana. No? Kasi there are opportunities, different opportunities to learn depending on the types of media. Next po. Okay, I need you to access the link. That is the study guide template. If you have naman the presentation slide. But basically, in terms of the sections or the components, you have to have a form of introduction in your module study guides. And then the learning objectives. By learning objectives, you can simply adopt the learning objectives of that specific module or lesson as prepared by or written by the faculty. You can break them down into manageable chunks, no? Meaning revise nyo slight yung learning objectives. Baka kasi too much for the learners to handle. But at the same time, you can create your own. No? Pwedeng mag-create ng bagong learning objectives anchored on or informed by the existing learning objectives from the faculty. No? And then you have, naka-clump siya together, your key concepts, meaning the topics, subtopics that your tutees will need help on. Learning resources, ideally they should have study questions. By study questions, they don't necessarily have to be questions. They can be in the form of tasks naman rin, like a self-check quiz, ganyan, or a graphic, whatever graphic organizer that they have to complete or prepare. And then you have to have teaching learning activities that will help address a specific learning objective. Sometimes, as I mentioned, you may have to have assessment tasks na different past learning activities. Pero major assessments yan. It will be ideal for you to have a closing for the study guide because for the introduction, it will provide an overview. Now, it can be an overview of what the study guide will cover. It can be a motivation question, meaning you'll try to get their attention first. No? It can be a prompt to how you will approach, how you will discuss the topics. Now, for the closing naman, it can be a summary of key points that you want them to really remember. It can be an introduction to the next study guide. It can be just a form of your attempt to bond. Walang magic formula actually for the closing part. That's why sometimes wala nang closing, diretso reference. Lalo na kung madaming exercises ka nang binigay. No? Next po. If we are to break them down, the components of a study guide, first you have to review the learning outcomes of the course that you have to teach your peers, or the objectives of that specific module. And then draft your objectives for the study guide. Uulitin ko, the objectives can be just a copy of the objectives set by the faculty. It can be an improvement or a chunked version of the objectives from the faculty, or they can be totally new. Depending on what you think should be covered or should be addressed. Now, in terms of guidelines, you can adopt the SMART guideline or the vascular guideline. Who's familiar with SMART objectives? Okay. Easy naman yan, di ba? Same lang naman din yung vascular in terms of what to ensure. Later on, I'll provide guide questions under each criterion. But basically, they can be your guide first in terms of structuring your objectives. Next po. Okay. Another guide would be forever famous, si Bloom's taxonomy, at least of cognitive objectives. There is no rule that you have to stick to higher order thinking skills na agad. Baka nga, the point of your peer tutoring would be to cover the lower order thinking skills first. Just so your peers will be prepared to study the more difficult ones. No? Nilagay ko lang dyan as a refresher in terms of definition, in terms of the levels ng complexity. But you don't need to memorize and identify if your objective is touching on the applying stage or level, no? And so on and so forth. Next po. Okay, there's also a list of the usual objectives used per level, but do not treat them as like a Bible na ito lang yung verbs na acceptable. Yan lang yung nagkataon na usually used. Next po. Now there's this affective na objective. Later, pag nag-start na yung mga workshops, ano ko ulit yung link to the slides. Okay? So, balikan nyo na lang. The list of, this is still from Bloom's, pero may kasama na siya. Si Krathwohl, may katabi na siya. Because there are 3 types, domains. Cognitive yung usual, and that's our concern. But there are also 2 other domains, psychomotor and affective. Yung psychomotor, actually, pwede nyo i-touch on yun. If you feel that, you know why? If you feel that your peers, they're not physically healthy, but they should be, kasi wala naman silang disabilities, physical disabilities, You can try to encourage them. Kasi, that may affect rin how they study, how they perform sa class man and beyond, right? So, pwede rin naman yun. Pero hindi nyo na siya para ilagay dun sa study guide. Unless, it's gonna be your strategy, for example, to condition them to study certain resource. Halimbawa. So, feel free to add na you will ask them to move or something. Now, for the affective domain, there are also levels now. But here, you're not always going to be expected to write objectives that will address yung emotions, sense of belongingness and all that. Baka hindi na yun dun sa study guide. Baka that's more about how you relate with how you deal with your peers. Next po. Okay, ito na, writing. I tried. This can be a formula. There's this ABC method actually, simpler, pero same rin naman siya ni ABCD. The idea is for you to ensure that you will incorporate the audience, meaning your tutees, the behavior that you expect for them to do, the actions that you expect them to do or demonstrate, and the condition and degree. Sometimes, yung condition and degree ay na-merge na. Alright? But the idea here is you have to have those 4 elements in how you'll draft your learning objectives. Example, this one. Organic chemistry course, I think. Wow, yung mga, may mga huwag niyo ako tatanungin. I mean, I got this from a real study guide. So here, there are 2 expectations, at least for this specific module. In the case of your study guide, you're not always expected to, again, have an equivalent counterpart study guide for an entire module, ha? You can't just choose a topic or 2 within that module. Tutok lang tayo dun sa whatever it is that your tutees may find difficult. And then, yung topics na covered. Next po. These are 3 other examples in terms of how you can adopt the ABCD method of drafting learning objectives. So, for example, here at the end of this module, so may expectations na kayo na buong module yung gagawin. You or the student, your peer, should be able to design a differentiated lesson plan for a diverse classroom using inclusive teaching strategies and library resources available. This one kasi is for a Bachelor of Education Studies na students. So, major talaga nila ay edu. The second example, Math 11, I think. Or basic pa. Parang Pisay ata to eh. I'm not sure anymore. But here, ang idea is, again, be clear with whatever it is that you ask them to do or demonstrate. The typical weakness ay hindi singular. Yung the behavior. Laging tandem ng verbs. Paano mo yun i-measure? Sige nga. I mean, how would you gauge that this specific behavior is successfully met kung may kasama pa siyang iba? Lagi bang yun ang condition? So, better na pag-separate mo na lang siya. That's why it's sa SMART at saka sa vascular, di ba? It has to be singular. They have to be measurable. Third example, Science 11, I think it's a GE course. Pero ganun pa rin yung idea. You have to have a condition and you have to have the degree as to how, sometimes, lalo na if gumamit kayo ng ChatGPT, sometimes sasabihin pa yon yung degree, answering 3 out of 4 questions accurately. Ay ganun siya kaliteral. So you should not rely on, okay, GPT.